On April 12, 2000, Ronaldo walked onto the pitch at the Stadio Olimpico for the first time in 5 months. The entire stadium rose to applaud him. He had been through one serious knee operation already. He had fought his way back. And 6 minutes into his comeback, he attempted one of his trademark darting runs and collapsed to the ground screaming. The kneecap tendon in his right knee had completely ruptured. His physiotherapist ran onto the pitch and looked at the knee. The kneecap was not where it was supposed to be. It had ended up in the middle of his thigh. The entire stadium fell silent. Doctors said it was the worst football injury they had ever seen, and the question that hung over the sport was simple and devastating. Was Ronaldo finished at 23 years old? For the next 2 years, Ronaldo barely played. He missed the entire 2000 to 2001 season. He worked 9 to 10 hours every single day in rehabilitation just to give himself a chance of returning. Not a chance of returning to his best, just a chance of playing football again. The media had already written his obituary. Pundits said his explosive capacity was gone forever, that even if he came back physically, the Ronaldo who had terrorized defenders in the late 1990s was dead. And they had a point. His body had a condition called trochlear dysplasia, an instability in the kneecap that made explosive movement almost impossible to sustain. The very thing that made Ronaldo the most dangerous player on the planet was also slowly destroying his body. But here is what nobody who wrote those obituaries understood about this man. Ronaldo had already survived something worse than a knee injury. He had survived 1998, and that gave him a motivation nobody else on earth could fully understand. Subscribe to Goalline Stories right now, because what happened next is one of the greatest comebacks in the history of sport. By late 2001, Ronaldo had finally returned to playing for Inter Milan. Not the Ronaldo of 1997 and 1998, a different version. Slower, heavier. The explosive pace that had made him untouchable was diminished, but the finishing was still there. The instinct was still there, and the hunger, the specific, burning, personal hunger that came from lying on a hotel room floor in Paris in 1998 and watching Brazil lose a World Cup final. That was more powerful than anything he had ever felt in his life. He scored 7 goals in 10 games toward the end of the 2001 to 2002 season. Enough to convince Brazil's coach, Luiz Felipe Scolari, to take him to the 2002 World Cup in Japan and South Korea. The decision was controversial. Brazil's qualification campaign without Ronaldo had been a disaster. They had barely made it to the tournament. Critics said taking a player who had barely played in 2 years to a World Cup was reckless. That Scolari was making an emotional decision, not a football one. Then the tournament started, and Ronaldo answered every single critic with the only language that matters in football: goals. He scored against Turkey in the opening group game. He scored twice against Costa Rica. He scored against Belgium. He scored against Turkey again in the semi-final. By the time Brazil reached the final against Germany in Yokohama, he had already scored 6 goals, more than any other player in the tournament. The ghost of 1998 was still there. Everyone watching knew that. The final was the moment everything would either be redeemed or destroyed forever. And Ronaldo walked out onto that pitch in Yokohama carrying 4 years of pain on his shoulders. What happened next silenced every person who had ever doubted him. The 2002 World Cup final kicked off on June 30th in Yokohama, Japan. Brazil versus Germany. 69,000 people in the stadium. The entire world watching. And Oliver Kahn in goal for Germany, arguably the greatest goalkeeper on the planet at that time. Kahn had been extraordinary throughout the tournament. He had conceded just 1 goal in 6 games. He was the reason Germany were in the final. And for 67 minutes, he kept Ronaldo and Brazil completely quiet. The first half finished 0-0. Brazil were controlling the game but could not find a way through. The weight of 1998 was present in every moment. And then everything changed in a single second. Rivaldo struck a shot toward Kahn's goal. It was not a particularly dangerous effort. Kahn should have held it comfortably. But the ball slipped through his gloves. And Ronaldo, who had spent 4 years imagining this exact moment, who had worked 10 hours a day in rehabilitation for the right to be standing in that stadium, was the first to react. He pounced on the rebound and drove it into the net. 1-0 Brazil. The Yokohama Stadium erupted. Ronaldo ran toward the corner flag with his arms outstretched and screamed at the sky. Not the controlled celebration of a player who scores every week. The raw, uncontrollable release of a man who had been carrying the weight of 1998 for 4 years and had just put it down. Then, 12 minutes later, Ronaldo scored again. A perfectly placed finish into the bottom corner. 2-0. Brazil were world champions for the 5th time, and standing in the middle of it all, holding the golden boot as the tournament's top scorer with 8 goals, was a man whose kneecap had been in his thigh 2 years earlier. The impossible had happened. When the final whistle blew in Yokohama, Ronaldo fell to his knees on the pitch. Not from exhaustion, from something that had no other way of coming out. He had visualized this moment every single day for 4 years. He said it himself. I used to visualize the trophy in front of my eyes and imagine what a wonderful feeling it must be to hold it up in the air. That image had kept him going through the operations, through the rehabilitation, through the media telling him his career was over, through the dark moments alone in a treatment room at 10 o'clock at night when his body was screaming at him to stop. And now, the trophy was real. And the feeling was real. And 4 years of pain dissolved in a single moment on a pitch in Japan. But the redemption was about more than the trophy. It was about what Ronaldo had proven to the sport itself, that the human body could be pushed to limits that doctors said were impossible, that a kneecap that had ended up in a man's thigh could somehow find its way back to where it belonged, that a player who had been written off by every pundit and every journalist could come back and win the Golden Boot at a World Cup. FIFA named him the World Player of the Year for the 3rd time. He won the Ballon d'Or. He won the Laureus World Sports Award for Comeback of the Year. But none of those awards captured what Ronaldo had actually done. Because what he had done was not just athletic, it was an act of pure refusal. A refusal to accept the story the world had written for him. And the 1998 World Cup final, the night in Paris that had haunted him for 4 years, was finally just a memory, not a wound anymore, a scar. And scars mean you survived. The haircut became iconic. Before the 2002 World Cup, Ronaldo shaved his head except for a triangular patch of hair at the front. The Brazilian media called it bizarre. Fans mocked it. Photographers could not stop taking pictures of it. And that was exactly the point. Ronaldo later admitted he did it deliberately. He wanted every camera in the world focused on his hair so his teammates could prepare for the tournament without the full pressure of the media spotlight. He took the attention onto himself and redirected it away from the squad. It was a small act, but it revealed something important about who Ronaldo had become. The boy who had been failed by the adults around him in 1998 had grown into a man who understood exactly how to protect the people around him. But the real story of Ronaldo after 2002 is what the injuries had taken from him permanently. He was never again the player he had been before November 1999. The explosive acceleration that had made him genuinely impossible to contain was gone. Defenders who had once had nightmares about facing him could now hold their ground. He compensated with movement, positioning, and finishing that remained world-class. But the version of Ronaldo that had scored 34 goals in a season for Inter Milan, the version that had made the entire 1998 World Cup look like his personal stage, that version never came back. His physiotherapist said it plainly. He was never quite the same after the knee injury. The sport lost something in those 2 years that it never fully recovered. Because the Ronaldo of 1997 and 1998 was not just a great player. He was something the game had never seen before and has never seen since. And the tragedy is that we only got 2 years of him at his absolute peak before his body began to break. Ronaldo played his last game for Brazil at the 2006 World Cup in Germany. He scored his 15th World Cup goal in that tournament, a record at the time. Then his body finally gave out completely. More knee problems, more operations. A brief comeback with Corinthians in Brazil, where he scored 18 goals in 2009. then retirement in 2011. He was 34 years old. A man whose body had been through more surgery than most people experience in a lifetime finally allowed himself to stop. The numbers he left behind tell part of the story. 3 World Cup golden boots across 3 tournaments, 15 World Cup goals, 2 World Cup winners' medals, 3 FIFA World Player of the Year awards, 2 Ballon d'Or titles. But the numbers do not tell you what it felt like to watch him at his peak. Maradona said he was the greatest player he ever saw.
El más grande 9 que vi, sin ninguna duda. Lo decía recién que si no hubiese sido por las lesiones, hubiese sido el más grande de la historia. No, sin ningún lugar a dudas. Y estoy pasando por arriba de muchos jugadores muy buenos. Pero lo que tiene Ronnie también es ser una gran persona. Por eso, gracias, maestro.
Eso no, para mí, Diego. Tú, un gran amigo. Gracias por invitar y hablar con nuestra gente.
Zidane said Ronaldo was the best in the world when healthy.
Sans hésitation, Ronaldo.
Without hesitation, Ronaldo.
Ronaldo. Why?
Why? C'est the best. Et pourquoi? Parce que...
And why? Because we see very often, for me, very big players step up and perform in big games. And that's what he did. But I was especially impressed with him during training. He had such an ease with the ball. It was quite disconcerting and sometimes even irritated people. But it was a part of his personality to irritate people from time to time, even in daily life, not only on the pitch, but he is number one.
Roberto Carlos, the man who held him as he convulsed on a hotel room floor in Paris in 1998, said watching Ronaldo come back and win the 2002 World Cup was the most emotional moment of his entire career. Not a trophy, not a personal achievement. Watching his friend refuse to be broken. The 1998 World Cup final defined Ronaldo in ways that had nothing to do with football. It showed the world what happened when the adults around a 21-year-old prioritized a nation's obsession over a young man's health. And the 2002 World Cup final showed what that same young man did with the pain of that betrayal. He carried it to Japan. He converted it into 8 goals. And on a pitch in Yokohama, he lifted the one thing that 1998 had stolen from him. Ronaldo's story is not about the goals or the records or even the knees. It is about what happens when someone refuses to let the worst moment of their life be the last word. If you want more stories about the human side of football that nobody else is telling, subscribe to Goalline Stories. We will see you in the next chapter.